We are live once again with Coffee with Humans. Today, my special guest is Dave the Caveman Chapman. Welcome, Dave, to Coffee with Humans.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Well, I'm excited to hear what this whole caveman thing is about. But first, I'm curious, what inspired you to click the button to have coffee with me?
Well, since the pandemic started, I started doing my own podcast here and there, and I'm going to put podcast in air quotes there because really what it is most of the time is just me going off on a tangent and ranting about something for 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
The last one that I did was actually I titled it "F Those Mother Effers," and it was a whole bunch of things about the things that I had experienced recently that I hated and the things that I loved. And so I was really enjoying that. And then I started producing a podcast for my wife. And I started thinking, the thing I haven't done has been a guest. Like, I'm an interesting guy. Why not try and find a place to be a guest? And
Yeah.
so I was scrolling through some stuff and I found yours. And I thought, well, hell, I'm human and I like coffee. And this guy looks pretty pleasant. He looks like the kind of guy I'd sit next to at the bar and chat with. So I dropped a little thing in the clicked the button and said, let's give this a shot.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to have you. And I do hope that I deliver on the perception that I would be one of those good guys that you could have a drink with at a bar.
Yeah, so far, so good.
Well, the cool thing is, and this for our viewers and listeners, the great thing about Coffee with Humans is that I don't know you yet, Dave, and I've done zero research on you, and so you've got the upper hand in this relationship. That if you've seen me on all these and on any episodes before, you know more about me than I know about you, and that's the cool thing about Coffee with Humans because it really is two strangers who get together to have coffee, make the world a better place. So, what's this caveman thing about? Curious.
Caveman started back in the 90s. I picked up everything that I had, or put everything that I could fit. I had a little Isuzu truck, little 1988 red Isuzu pickup truck, all banged up and beat up. And my best friend and I decided, you know what? We don't want to live in Florida anymore. We're going to go to Colorado. And so we packed everything we could fit in this little truck. It was a hilarious trip, man. We went across the country from Florida to Colorado, did 2 days in the truck, and we had this 15-inch woofer, home speaker in the seat between us. So we're like this with one arm out the window, and we both had the horrible farmer's tans when we got there on one side, and ended up enrolling in Colorado State while I was there. And found out they had a radio station, KCSU. And I thought, I've always loved music. It's always been a thing I wanted to do. And so I ended up going in and working there for a while. And then after that, I was in commercial radio for just a little bit until my son was born. But that was where the caveman came from, is that, I just kind of had this look about me at the time. My head was shaved. And I don't know if people probably can't see it. And most people can't, they don't recognize it. But I don't have any eyebrows. I actually shave my eyebrows. And so I was completely bald with shaved eyebrows. And somebody said, man, you look like a freaking caveman. And I was like, Dave, man, the caveman, that works. And so I adopted that as my radio name. I was Dave, man, the caveman, doing it to you in your ear hole. And had a lot of fun and some good times, and made up some stories along the way. There were a couple of stories that I've let out about, dragging people by their hair into my tent and stuff. But the reality of it is that somebody just said, dude, you look kind of like a caveman. And then it stuck. I thought, well, hey, Dave, man, the caveman, that rhymes.
Yeah, you got to play off that for sure. Well, since you brought it up, what's the deal why do you shave your eyebrows?
Well, I was at the time I was in my early 20s, and thanks to genetics, I was losing my hair already. And the last haircut that I had before I moved to Colorado was a mohawk. And as you can probably imagine, a mohawk doesn't look that cool when you start losing the hair up front. So I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? And, I said, well, I'm just going to shave it. So I shaved my head, and I come out of the bathroom. I've got like this single blade Bic disposable razor. I'm broke. I just moved across the country. I'm shaving with whatever I can find. And I come out of the bathroom and look at my roommate, and I said, what do you think? And I'm just like blood dripping down my face, this horrible mess. And he goes, something's not right, man. And I said, oh, you mean the blood? He's like, no, the eyebrows. I said, what do you mean? He's like, dude, go shave the eyebrows off. So I went back in the bathroom and shaved the eyebrows off, and they've been gone ever since. And I have such a pronounced ridge. Well, one of the girls that I did radio with actually used to call me Australopithecus robustus. And,
Okay.
I have this pronounced ridge, and most people don't even notice. They see the shadow of the ridge over my eyes and think that I still have eyebrows.
Yeah, I wouldn't have noticed. I don't shave my eyebrows. Take my glasses off here, but I'm not sure that you can see it. I'm not. I think I got it, but sometimes I get like a gigantic, like really black hair that it's like the freak of all hairs. There's one on this side, there's one on this side, and it starts to just I forget about it. Because I don't inspect my face frequently.
Right.
But then somebody usually my daughter, she'll be like, "What's going on there, Dad?"
Well, I'm always afraid now that if I let them grow back, that it's going to be like the Juice Man, or Andy Rooney. Like I'm going to have these things growing out of my head, and it's so I just keep shaving them at this point.
I'm afraid that's my future, and I don't know I don't know, because with one I feel like there's an army coming behind, which is why I just keep plucking it, and hopefully that takes care of it. I don't know. So you were in radio, huh?
Yeah, and that was it's something that I miss every day. I got really excited a couple of weeks ago because Sirius XM Octane does a thing where you can send in a recording. And so I sent in a recording a couple of weeks ago and got to hear myself on the radio introducing a Pop Evil song. And it was
wow.
the first time in 21 years that I had heard myself coming out of the radio. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool. I've missed it every day, and I don't regret leaving it. But I was early enough in my career that I hadn't paid my dues yet. And so I wasn't making much money. I was working, the overnight shifts when I had to. I was working weekends. I was doing promotions. I was setting up the tents and setting up the sound systems and whatever I could to try and make enough money. And then my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my first wife, I'm on my second marriage now, which is a much better one. But we can talk about that later. But yeah, I ended up having a child, and said, I got to go back to getting a real job. I gotta do something that's going to pay the bills and feed this kid. So I left radio and ended up at that point becoming a production manager in a litigation copying service. So I had, we would get press releases from the state attorney's office. We would get court case stuff, sometimes 13, 14 boxes of documents that we would have to photocopy for both sides of the court battle. And
okay.
Very interesting. I saw some things in that job that I'll never be able to unsee, as far as, crime scene photos and things like that. But that was what I ended up doing to pay the bills at the time. And I've always thought, if I could get the opportunity to go back into radio, I would love to do it. But at this point, I'm not even sure how, how to go about it.
Well, it seems to me that if you started a podcast, isn't that kind of the first thing you're going back into? It's essentially radio. It's not broadcast in quite the same way, but isn't it sort of the same thing?
It is, and I think that's what attracted me to it, was that it gave me the chance to open the mic up and just and be myself again, and share some of the silly crap that comes through my brain.
What was it about radio or is it about radio and podcasting that inspires you?
Well, I've been a collector of music since I was, as long as I can remember. I remember buying, and it depends on how big a fan of music people are, if they'll get this, but the first album I ever bought with my own allowance was Dream Police by Cheap Trick. And, okay. I think that came out in like 1978. And so I was like 6 years old, saving up my allowance to go and buy records. And so I've just always been a huge music person, and I've always enjoyed sharing myself, but I've always been very self-conscious about my appearance. And so with radio, it was kind of, I had an ability to be anonymous. I got to be Caveman, and I got to say whatever was on my mind, and nobody had to see me, and I didn't have to see anybody. And so that initially, I think, was part of the appeal. But then I started doing, on-site promotions, going and introducing bands and doing interviews. And then that really, that became the pull at that point, like, the interaction with people. And, I got to interview the Refreshments, and it was shortly after King of the Hill got big. And so, that was kind of the big thing for them at the time. But then they also had, 2 albums out, and I did a lot of research, and it was really like, it was so gratifying to be able to just sit there and talk back and forth with these people that I had such admiration and respect for. And then, they gave me passes to the show that night, and their manager came out and found me in the crowd and said, "Hey, the guys in the band want to buy you a drink. They really appreciated the homework that you did." And, they said that was one of the best interviews they've had. And it's
wow.
Things like that, that once the initial pull got me in, that was the kind of thing that made me want to keep doing it.
So your first album was Cheap Trick album, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
Are you a big fan of Cheap Trick?
Not so much anymore, but I certainly was at the time.
Yeah. Well, one thing we have not covered yet is I'm in Rockville, Illinois, the home of Cheap Trick.
Okay. Nice.
Where are you located?
Well, currently I am in Gray Court, South Carolina.
All right.
It's a very rural town. I'm about 45 minutes from Greenville, which is, that's a place most people will know. So I'm essentially in the Greenville, South Carolina area, but I have a bid in on a house. I'm trying to move up to Hamburg, New York, which is just outside of Buffalo, because I was born in Michigan. I'm not a Southern guy. Somehow I've ended up in the South most of my life, but I'm not a Southern boy. I was born in Michigan, and I hate being 90 degrees and humid all the time. So I'm looking to get back up to where I can shovel some snow and get a snowmobile and maybe learn how to ice fish.
Yeah, it's nice to have some seasons.
Yeah. And that was one of the things. I grew up in Florida. I spent the better part of my life in Florida from the time I was 8 until I was 25, and that was when I moved out to Colorado for a little while. And I loved being there as a kid, but that's one of the things that I really didn't like about it. Is it felt like we had summer for 9-10 months, and then then everything bloomed and you sneezed for a while, and then maybe you would have a couple of days where everybody's complaining because they got to put socks on, and that was winter to them. And I'm like, dude, come on, I'm still out there in shorts and a t-shirt going, this is perfect, 50 degrees, I love this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people don't have enough appreciation for the vast differences in cultures and climates and views, let's say, that you can get just by traveling a handful of hours. I mean, there's really not that big of a deal to hop in a car, and beeline it down to, South Carolina or go to Florida and come on the way back and experience a completely different. It's almost like a completely different world in really some ways.
Yeah. And I do that, I still have a lot of family in Florida. So it's about 10 hours from here to, I grew up in St. Petersburg, which is Tampa Bay area. And I still have, my family that's still around. They're mostly down there. So I go down every so often. It's about a 10-hour drive. So it's nothing, to get there, but it is, that's one thing I will say about Florida is, like, if I slept the whole trip and woke up and opened my eyes and opened my nose, I would be able to tell you that I was in Florida. Like, it's, just that sea air, there's a whole different feel to it than there is even in coastal South Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. So is that in your background, is that a keyboard?
It is. Yeah. It's a 88 key electric, and I can't play it worth a darn, but I'm trying to learn.
That's awesome.
That one of the things a few years ago, I challenged myself to try and get out of my comfort zone a little bit, because I have a tendency to kind of shrink away and hide. And so I actually was in New York City. I spent 3.5 years in New York City on a contract. I'm by trade. Currently, I'm an instructional designer. So I develop curriculum and I train trainers, and I develop training programs for an electronic health record. And I work in cardiology and radiology departments. And so I had a contract in New York City that I was lucky enough to keep for 3.5 years. And while I was there, I thought, you know what? I've got nothing to do at night. I'm in a city that I don't live in. Somebody's paying me to be here. And I started taking piano lessons. And
oh, wow.
So I bought that so that I could keep practicing. And I don't practice as much as I should, but I've every once in a while I have a little breakthrough on it and go, oh, I can play half of Imagine now. Woo!
That's really cool. I think what you talked about there, that you are you challenge yourself to kind of get out of your comfort zone or out of a kind of that rut. Has that been a common theme in your life? It seems you've moved around quite a bit.
Yeah. It's every once in a while, and it's been the same with jobs. Like I get bored with things, and the boredom tends to be what challenges me to finally get out of my comfort zone. As I can't take being bored for too long, so then I've got to do something, and I realize doing something means that I have to do something I haven't done yet, and oh my God, is that scary? But then finally I work up the courage and say, scary is good. Scary is what gives us things to talk about. So
yeah, absolutely. How's it been going with your podcast? And because that sounds like it's something new, building off a skill that you obviously already have and an interest that you've had for years, and now you've got this new technological outlet for it.
Yeah, it's I've enjoyed it, but having still worked full time, I didn't do it as much as I wanted to. I hadn't gotten on a schedule, so that's kind of one of the things that I've been looking at the last few weeks. Is okay, I want to start trying to do it consistently. Even if nobody hears it, at least I'm doing something consistently. I'm having fun with it, and the idea for it was actually born. It was supposed to be a family thing initially. I have 4 kids. 2 of them were born to me, and then 2 of them I gained luckily through marriage. All great kids, and 3 of them, the oldest, all like to go to shows with me. So we had a family tradition. We, living here in Carolina, we would go to Carolina Rebellion every year.
Okay.
And so we went the last year that we went. It was they had changed the name to Epicenter, and we got up. It was about 7:00 in the morning, and we're all walking out to that fabulous little portalette that they've got for you to get rid of your excrement. And one of the kids said something, and it was I'm on 4 hours of sleep with probably still a buzz from the night before, and they said something, and I said something, and I was like, oh man. So that was some blasphemy before breakfast, and the idea was born out of that. We were like, we should do a podcast. We should call it Blasphemy Before Breakfast.
I was wondering when you said that, I was like, that sounds like a great podcast name.
and so initially the idea was that, we were going to center it around our concert travels, that it was going to be me and the 3 older kids, and that we were going to go to all these shows, and we were going to, broadcast from the shows, and we were going to record, and we were going to meet people in the campgrounds when we were camping, and then the pandemic hit. And so that kind of blew that. But, and none of us live in the same place at this point. Like one of my kids was in New York. I have one that was living here with me still. Because my 2 are both gone from the house. They're 21 and 19 now. Okay. Wow, my God. Yeah, 21 and 19. And so then I've got one that's about to turn 18 and one that just turned 15 at home. And so I was going to start doing it with the 18-year-old, but then he's got school and all this other stuff. And finally I said, I'm just going to sit down and open up the mic and see what comes out. And so that's what it has turned into. But I'm still hopeful at some point that, it can go back to what we originally intended, which was kind of this family show that's not for families. And, we can meet cool people and maybe even meet some of the musicians, and then it would feel a lot more like radio to me, which is kind of the first time that I've realized that was that I was trying to inject that radio into it initially.
Yeah. Well, when you signed up for this, and when we were talking about what to title our chat today, the question I pose is, just what generally is on your mind, and then for our viewers and listeners, we talk about anything. But the title that you put on there today was "Don't Do It Alone." That idea of not doing it alone, is that what that podcast was about? Like engaging family and in your conversations by not doing it alone, or where does this "Don't Do It Alone" topic come from for you?
Well, the "Don't Do It Alone" topic for me comes from just all the years that I've tried to do everything myself. Like I spent most of my life thinking, I don't need anybody else, and I don't want anybody else to help me. And, I recently published a book, and it's called Cave Etchings. And what it is just a whole bunch of poems and prose and things that I wrote throughout the course of my life. And most of these things were written in times of depression or despair or some other, mental health related feel. And I always I would write. I wouldn't tell anybody what was going on. I wouldn't open up and say, hey, I'm feeling down, or hey, I'm really struggling today, or whatever. I would put a wall up around myself and I would write. And finally, in this past year with the pandemic, again, I had all this time on my hands, and I said, I said for 20 years I was going to turn this into a book, and I finally did. And so that for me was kind of saying that I don't want to do it alone anymore. And since I've realized that, part of what really is a driving force in my life at this point, I'll be 49 next month. So I've got quite a bit of life behind me, and God willing, quite a bit of life in front of me still. And with that life that's in front of me, I want to be somebody that gets people to open up, that gets people to realize that they don't have to do it alone, to help reduce the stigma of mental health and let people know. I've always had kind of people look at me initially sometimes, and I'm a big dude. I'm 6'1", about 300 pounds. I'm built mostly like a football player, and when I'm trying to keep people out, it's real easy to do. I can look very unapproachable, and so that even that drives me even more to let people see what a big teddy bear I am. To say that, okay, yeah, you think I'm this big tough guy that doesn't need anybody, and I'm here to admit today that I do. I need people. I've got to have support around me, and so do you. And it's okay to say that. It's not. I was a substance abuse counselor for several years. I worked in a methadone clinic, and one of the things that really hit me was that you can't do it alone. It was being able to have a men's group and have these guys open up was huge. And, I realized how long I've been trying to do it all myself, and how much it doesn't work, in spite of me making myself believe that it worked. It didn't work. I've got to have people. And if I can say I've got to have people, then anybody can say they've got to have people. We don't have to do it alone, and I don't want people to do it alone.
Is that the one of the topics on your podcast? Are you kind of putting yourself at the intersection of that? I mean, you've written a book about it. You've lived a life that has you've maybe entering this transition to living in a different way. How's your podcast fit in with that?
Well, it's, my podcast has really just been kind of, when I've done it, it's been very off the cuff. It's been whatever happens to be in my brain. And it hasn't come about yet that that's what's in my brain when I do the podcast, but it certainly is, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into any specific topic, and that was part of the thing is the title is going to scare a few people away. And I get that, blasphemy before breakfast. There are going to be people that look at it and go, oh, I don't want to hear that. But it's not, it's not like I'm only going to slam religion, or I'm only going to talk about this or that. It's whatever's on my mind. And it might be that I took a really good dump that morning, or it might be that I'm really struggling, and so, since we're talking about that, my next one may be very much that. I just found out the other day that somebody I'm very, very close to has cancer, and is probably, I'm probably not going to have an opportunity to make many more memories. And so, that is something that's definitely on my mind, and it may be something that I talk about. I just lost my dad not even 6 months ago, and now I'm looking at losing somebody else that's important to me. And my default has always been to kind of shut down and not let anybody in and not talk about it. And so to do a podcast where I'm just bearing my soul and talking about it, and, saying this is what's going on with me, definitely is something that I think is going to happen.
Yeah. It seems that sharing and opening up to those types of things is the natural conclusion of processing in a healthy way, or at least being willing to do that. I found for myself also, most my default mode is to close off, push away, and I've found it to be more beneficial to open up the conversations, because it does seem that we as maybe it's guys. I don't know if it's exclusively guys, but I'll talk from a guy's perspective. Um, Guys, capable guys tend to need to maintain some sort of vision, right? If people are looking at you as this, physically intimidating, strong guy, it almost becomes a self-perpetuating thing that, well, because people see me that way, I become that, and then I start working out of that identity of big, physically intimidating, strong, when in fact that's only one component. So what? You are, big, intimidating, strong guy. But to your point of like this, you've got this podcast where Blast Me Before Breakfast, showing one component of who you are. You're actually a holistic being with all sorts of fears and hopes and struggles. And why not be able to open up the communication a little bit further and present as a more holistic being when time makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And, I spent all that time kind of walling myself off and trying to, looking back, it feels like almost like trying to be inoffensive, trying not to alienate anybody. But at the same time, what I was doing was alienating everybody. Like I wasn't fostering close relationships. I wasn't making these deep connections with people because I wasn't giving them who I was. Like I was giving them just enough so that they didn't run away, but I wasn't giving them anything to make them want to hang out either.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's what I want to have is I want to have meaningful conversations. I want to have deep connections with people. I want the space that I'm in to be a safe space for everybody to be able to be who they are and, love each other basically.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get there. It took me basically blowing up my first marriage to figure out, that it wasn't okay. Like one of the most profound moments, I said that I was a counselor. One of the most profound moments I had was shortly after my first wife told me that she was leaving. And I was driving up the mountain. I had to be at work at 5:00 in the morning because it was, medication assisted treatment. So people had to come in initially every day to get their medication. And so, to work with people that had jobs, because of course we wanted them to have jobs, we had to be open really early. So, it's like 4:30 in the morning and I'm driving up the mountain. It's about 15 degrees. I was in Boone, North Carolina at the time. And I'm going up the mountain and something came on the radio and it was a Foo Fighters song and the lyrics of the song hit me. And I broke down. I was a mess, like so bad that I had to pull over and stop my car. And what occurred to me in that moment is that I had been treating every emotion like it was weakness. Everything that I felt, I internalized and I made it anger. And I just used it to keep everybody away because if I'm mad, nobody's going to mess with me. And I realized in that moment the damage that I had done to my life and my relationships by taking everything and turning it into anger. And luckily I had the men's group that day and I went in and I sat down on the chair and I was like, guys, I got to share this with you. Like, this is what happened to me this morning. And it was such a meaningful, like the group was never the same after that. It was, everybody became a little bit more open because they saw themselves and what I had to say. And it was then that I realized I can be a catalyst for, people to recognize the damage that they're doing to themselves.
Wow. What a profound moment and opportunity. And it seems like there's a vision that comes to my mind of noise, like all of this noise, but there's one frequency that cuts through that noise and a kind of a voice that everybody hears. And that's that it's what you expressed in that moment. It seems to people was a level of communication that everybody felt, everybody heard, because at the core of who we are so similar to one another, and all of our differences are a bunch of noise on the outside, but at the core, boy, if you speak from the heart, it has a way of just cutting through all the crap, and now and really making serious life change, which is, I think, what everybody wants. Ultimately, I mean, at the core, people, whether they acknowledge it or not, or process it consciously, live out of this idea that I really want to be loved. I really want to be accepted. I really want things to change. I want to be able to be better. Right. I think the vast majority of people want that. And then when they hear somebody else say, "Hey, I'm doing this, and here's what I'm hearing for myself," it just has a way, I think, of connecting in ways that superficial connection, superficial communication just doesn't do. It's not possible.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what I'm striving for in my life now, is just having, I want to have everybody get that freedom that I got when I realized that I was just walking around angry all the time, and that it wasn't serving me.
Yeah. There's a quote. I'm gonna try and pull it up here. That I came across. I don't even know when it was, but let's see here. There's a quote that comes to my mind that talks of what it's. I don't want to misquote it, but it's something like, "Too often we call a man angry when he is merely sad." I wish I could find this right offhand. Oh, post a quote. Oh boy.
And I've had somebody tell me that anger isn't even an emotion. That's, and I kind of go back and forth with my feelings on that. But given, what we were just talking about, like, anger may not be an emotion. Anger is more a reaction, because I was taking the emotion sad. I was taking the emotion hurt. I was taking the emotion, whatever, and turning it into that anger, but that wasn't the emotion. That was the reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've heard that as well, that really, and this is where that quote comes from. Oh, there we go. Here we go. I'll find this. I'm going to put up on the screen here for our edification, because I think it's so valuable that people see this sort of thing. Doot. Every man has his secret sorrows which the world knows not, and oftentimes we call a man cold when he is only sad.
Yeah.
Which I think is so true, because there's that coldness, distance, anger are really masks for something that we don't want to acknowledge to one another.
Yeah.
Because I'll speak for myself here, because acknowledging sometimes the really deep emotions, the things that they are powerful, right? They're overwhelming. And if I were to acknowledge them, then I would be whisked away. And for people who are very feeling, of which, you are it seems you're a very feeling guy, right? I'm a very feeling guy, and didn't acknowledge that for a long time. And it would come out in certain ways. It would come out in music, right? My love for music, I would get lost, and it was an emotional outlet, just playing around on the piano, an emotional outlet. It allowed me to process my world and my life in a deeper level that I was unable to do in any other context, right? Or sometimes in writing, being able to process my world. But music was the big thing, and still is the big thing. And I didn't recognize to the degree that I lived in my head simply as a mask for not having to just feel, because I would feel all the time about all sorts of things. And it's a scary place sometimes. And like you talked about, sometimes these things that we feel are we process them as weakness because we just believe that everybody else, might see it as see it as weakness. And what if we did show up? What if we were the guy who, cried at movies or something like that? What does
Yeah.
that say? Does it say that I'm not strong? I'm not capable? I'm not smart? Right? On down the line.
Right. And, for my generation, at least, I think it's very common that men grew up with dads who, it wasn't okay to cry. I'll give you something to cry about, stop it. Big boys don't cry. All of those things that, are in the vernacular of parenting, and something that I did not do as a parent. If my kids felt like crying, by God, cry, get it out, because at that point I had started to recognize, that I was hiding from my feelings. If I shared them, I had to actually deal with them. And I'll never forget the first time I cried in front of my oldest son. And it was liberating. It was scary as all get out, but it was liberating to be able to show him that side of me, and to know that, he wasn't going to think any less of me for it. He probably thought more of me for it. And now he's comfortable expressing his emotions in a way that I wasn't when I was a young man.
Yeah, right. Children watch what we do and learn. It seems what is acceptable, what is unacceptable based on our feedback. I know that for myself, I believe this is true. I've learned to cultivate a pretty deep relationship, I think, with my daughter, by being able to express, like, here's how I'm feeling, and give voice to those feelings, because and if you've spent some time as a counselor, for folks really, trapped in addictions and stuff, every decision is an emotional decision. That whole adage, every buying decision is an emotional decision. Well, the shit that we bring ourselves through sometimes in life is an emotional decision at first, at least, too. And we perpetuate some of these things because we don't acknowledge just where we're at as a human being. And that tends to be a repellent for people. I talked to somebody the other day. I said, she's really struggling, and I said, well, to walk me through all these terrible things have happened for you. Walk me through which of the doors that have closed, because it was just like close. Of the doors of these doors that have closed in your life, how many have you closed on your own? And she was visibly angry and defensive and said, none. And I said, okay. And then we walked through at least one door that had been closed by her for a reason. And I said, no, I'm judging you on this. There's no judgment coming from me. I just want to recognize the reality that you're having a tendency to close doors. And I said, and I know what it's like to put walls up where we put that wall up and people run into it and you're like, boom. And then they just slide off. It's like, I'm immovable. I said, and that's different than developing a force field. Force fields are different, where when people run into you, you're like, boom, and you press them back out. You push them, you repel them away. And I said, it feels to me you're putting up force fields, not walls. And you're becoming safe in that. But it's not working for you. Yep. So where's that connect with you in this idea of, don't do it alone. And then what this path that you're charting with your book and all?
It's like the big thing that I learned in the last decade or so is to take responsibility. Just what you were saying, like, how many of those doors did you close? And we don't want to take responsibility for that as humans. We don't want to be, it's really easy to blame. And I blamed a lot of things along the way for the way that I was. And when I finally learned how to take responsibility for I messed this up. I messed it up, and that's fine. And that was such a huge thing to be able to say, that's fine. Like, I'm not dead yet. That's the thing I always keep coming back to, is I'm not dead yet. None of this shit has killed me. Right. So, whoop-de-doo. Like it's, but yeah, I love what you were saying about I had the wall. I didn't necessarily repel people. I kind of buried them, like they hit, it was like cartoons sliding down. They're a puddle, never going to see it again.
Yeah. Right.
Because if I bounced them back, they had the chance to come back at that wall again,
So the last decade's taught you a lot. What's in store for you for the next decade? What's in your mind's eye?
One of the projects I'm working on right now, my wife, we've been married 8 years now. We just celebrated our 8-year anniversary in the Keys, which was really awesome.
Congratulations.
Convertible and drove down, did the drive from South Carolina down to Marathon in a convertible. And, but she's when I met her, she was just finishing training to be a life coach. And so she's been a life coach pretty much the whole time I've known her. And, about a year and a half ago, I started taking a little more involvement in the business because, I'm becoming more enlightened myself. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is a book about relationships. Wow. I started writing another book, but I'm writing it with my wife about relationships and the different ways that men and women deal with things and process things and communicate, and how we've managed to make it work in the ways that we have, because we look at each other 8 years in and we love each other more than we did the day we got married. And both of us were married for 10 years the first time, and by 8 years in, we were both done. I mean, we were checked out. There wasn't anything left to work with at that point. And so we're working on a book to try and show people how to have the kind of relationship that we have. And then, beyond that, I'm considering another book of poetry. I've been starting to write more. I've always fancied myself a writer. I was coming out of high school. I was originally a journalism major, and always really enjoyed it. I wrote a humor column in the high school newspaper, which some of that became part of the book that I just released. And so definitely more writing, definitely more podcasting, and definitely more just trying to find people to connect with so that they can have the kind of freedom that I've had. I want everybody to be able to take responsibility for what hasn't worked and their part in it, and change it, and be happy and be connected with people and have these deep, wonderful relationships that everybody craves, but so few people want to admit that they need it. I never wanted to admit that I needed people, and I need people. I need this back and forth, man. I need to be able to sit and just be with people.
Do you find that your relationship with your wife has had a hand in shifting your understanding of needing other people?
Absolutely. Early on, one of the things that she would get upset with me about is that I would never ask for help. Like, it was obvious to everybody that I needed help. I wasn't playing it off. I thought I was, but I wasn't playing it off. Everybody knew I needed some help. And that was something that she would get upset with me about, is like, you never ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. I said, but I don't need help. I'm strong. I'm tough. You need help. And
what were you scared about by not asking for help? Just out of curiosity.
I was scared of people thinking that I was incapable. I like, with the keyboard behind me, how many people have ever seen me play that other than my piano teacher up in New York? None. Not a one. I don't want people to see me do anything until I'm good at it. I don't want people to think that I suck at something. I'm scared of being, inadequate. And by asking for help or by needing help, that means that I'm inadequate. Yeah, or that's what I made it. That's not what it means. That's what I made it mean.
That's the story that played out in your mind. That was the tape that played.
Yeah.
Huh. And how did that? What sort of activities did you do to shift that mindset?
Well, we regularly engage in workshops. We did some stuff with Landmark Worldwide, which they have a couple of programs. One's called the Forum, and then they do the advanced course, and a lot of self-exploration in there, a lot of looking at where we can be responsible and, where we can be responsible, even if we're not sometimes, in the interest of moving past things. And we took on practices early in our relationship. One of the ones that we took on was that each night we would say something we didn't want to say. And, not like something like, oh, your hair looks like crap today, something like, this is going on and it scares me,
Yeah.
The first time I had to admit to her that, like, I don't have a job right now and I'm scared as hell, that was something I didn't want to say. And we took on the practice of saying it. And then we took on a practice of saying something that we did each day. Like she would ask me, what have I done today to please you? What did I do today that displeased you? And so practices like that really kind of got me to open up and communicate and feel like it was okay to reach out to other people.
Wow, that's powerful. And you used the word freedom earlier, which is it's a huge word.
Yeah.
That especially when we're talking about personal freedom.
Yeah, I feel like I have the freedom to be me now. I still keep a few of the filters on when I'm speaking, but it's more based on the audience than it is not wanting to share myself anymore. It's I feel that freedom to be me, and I feel the freedom to be okay with it if somebody doesn't like who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Which that always scared me so bad that somebody might not like me. And I think, some of it is age. I think as we get older, I'm seeing less and less of a give a damn as I get closer to 50. I don't care quite as much,
right.
But a lot of it is related to the work that I've done to kind of recognize, who I am and what I'm all about. And it's okay if somebody doesn't like that. That's fine. I can meet people where they're at, and I don't have to please everybody anymore. I just have to be happy.
I was working on this. As we're closing out our time, I'm going to show this to you just because I want your opinion on this. As a man in radio in a prior life, and then as a guy who's, processing the world, I feel like probably in radio you got some attaboys, right? You had the people who really liked you.
Yep.
Okay. Would it be safe to say you had the people who really didn't like you?
I think it would be safe to say, luckily that was it was a little bit before social media blew up, so I didn't have to deal with as many haters. They actually had to pick up the phone and talk to me if they wanted to tell me they thought I was an ass.
Yeah.
So
right.
it was more likely that I was going to hear from the people that enjoyed what I was doing.
Yeah. And you also made mention that there was a time when you felt like you needed to be inoffensive, I think is the word that you used, by being palatable to all people and sort of morphing yourself, probably, it sounds like, to be what the people needed. Does that sound a fair characterization?
Yeah, it's like I always say now, one of the things that I like to compare it to is that, I'm a hazy IPA that was trying to be a Coors Light,
Okay.
Like I'm this full flavored beer, but I was trying to be inoffensive.
Yeah.
I was trying to make everybody be okay with me.
Let me show you this graph and see if this rings true for you, because this is and the reason I say this, this has just been going through my mind. So I want your opinion.
All right.
I think most things operate on a bell curve, and I think that the bell curve of performance, or the bell curve of being ourselves, is that there's going to be a handful of people who really, really, really love us, and they're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, attaboy, you did a great job." And then there's going to be people who are like really, really hate us and like, "You're the worst thing ever. Leave my life." And then most people are just in the middle, they're like, "Yeah, cool, whatever," They don't care. And it seems to me that when our lives become too overly balanced, where all of a sudden everybody loves us and nobody hates us, there might be a problem. Also, similarly, there might be a problem when everybody hates us and nobody loves us, because we're just not operating by the standard distribution of most systems on the planet. And I think relationships and being ourselves, bringing ourselves to the table, because we are, if we're not offending at some point in time, I think we're not having clear boundaries.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And what I've been looking for now is I'm looking for those people that think I'm great. Like I tried to live so long and that everybody's okay with me. Like I'm okay with having a few down here as long as I can locate the people that are on the other side. That's the big thing for me, is that I want to locate the people that think I'm great so that I can spend more time with them. Because I don't, who knows how much time I've got. I want to find the right people to spend it with. And those are the people I want to spend it with, because those are the people that are going to be real with me.
Yeah. And it does seem that there's a risk in playing to the middle ground, because the middle ground is just it's a fickle place to be. There's not a real depth of connection. Which you might
loneliness. It's the loneliness of being, alone in a room full of people.
There's that quote. What is that quote? The worst thing you can do. I think somebody attributed it to Robin Williams at one point in time, and I'm not sure that he said it, but it like the worst thing you can do is make someone feel alone in your presence.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
So something like that. I don't remember it exactly, but I'm familiar with the quote you're talking about. And it's a lonely existence, to have everybody be okay with you. But then, that never got me invited to any of the parties. Everybody was okay with me, but nobody was thinking, oh shit, we need to invite Dave, was like, oh, well, yeah, Dave could be there. That'd be okay. And I want to be the one that I want to be at the top of the list for somebody,
Yeah.
And I was never going to get there being the guy that I was being, trying not to offend anybody, living in the middle. And I had that experience in New York City several times where, I would be sitting in just a crowded restaurant and realize that I felt completely lonely.
Yeah.
And what a bizarre way to feel,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time here, Dave, the Caveman Chapman. I respect your journey, man. Where you've come from, where you're headed, and I can see how these different component parts of your history are coming together now, and it seems like you're like a chemist almost at work, pulling these different pieces together and saying, hey, what if I made this thing? And I really like what you're doing with this Blasphemy Before Breakfast. First of all, I think it's a great name, and it clearly draws on some of your strengths. And then if you're building in, I think if you're building in this idea of other people into it as well, and then getting your voice out through writing, I think that's fantastic. There are very few people, a lot of people talk about doing stuff, and very few people follow through. So, mad respect to you for following through. Can people follow up with you at this that link you gave me, facebook.com/Caveman Chapman?
Yep. Yeah. Caveman Chapman. I post there fairly regularly. And I also post when I have new podcasts up, and there's a link to my book on there as well.
Awesome. Well, congratulations to to you on that book, and also this new book that you're writing with your wife. That's super cool. Valuable, really.
And very exciting, to be able to have that kind of a relationship with her it's really, really, really rewarding and exciting.
It's got to bring it to another level, it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining me on Coffee with Humans. This has been really great. I appreciate getting to know you.
I much appreciate your time. It's been fun.
Well, to our viewers and listeners, Coffee with Humans is live streamed, candid conversations between strangers who become friends, making the world a better place. Catch us frequently. I won't even give you a schedule anymore, but catch us frequently on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, other places. Subscribe and share, and then definitely check out Dave, the Caveman Chapman, on Facebook. Pick up his book, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us.
One of the things I love about Coffee with Humans are the raw conversations I get to have, meeting new people just like you. If you or someone you know should be on Coffee with Humans, go to coffeewithhumans.com. Remember, the only rule is no sales calls.
This has been Coffee with Humans. Subscribe to get updates or click to have coffee with me. coffeewithhumans.com.